Okay, good morning, folks. We are going to kick off. I hope you're all doing well. Lots of sunglasses and coffee cups in the audience. Sure you all had a good evening. I just want to say a quick shout out to Mike and team for putting on such an amazing day yesterday and pulling this whole thing together. The lineup has been absolutely fantastic. Really great turnout. People from all four corners coming to share ideas, best practice, etc. We've got another great day of panels, discussions and networking events ahead, so hope you're all here for the duration. So today I'm going to introduce the panel shortly, but today we're starting with a session around the Four Nations approach. So this is in the context of the upcoming March budget. So we're going to talk about some financial challenges that each of the regions shares, and also get a little bit of advice from our European friends on how they're making it work in terms of the relationship between the nighttime economy and government, local government and central government. So my name's Lyle Bignon. I'm a nighttime economy and music industry consultant based in Birmingham with clients across the UK. I do a lot of work in lobbying central and local government for around inward investment and championing talent, pipelines, etc. We've got a great panel here for you today. I'm just going to introduce them one by one, and then we'll get cracking. So we've got Boyd Slater from freethenight.co.uk, .org, and Boyd is here representing the interests of Northern Ireland's nighttime economy. We have Sunil Sharp, who is a lobbyist and activist as well as DJ. Is that fair to say? Representing Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. We have Michael Akultra, who is a policy advisor for the City of Amsterdam. We've got Michael Grieve, who's here on behalf of the Scottish contingent. So we'll be talking about some of the challenges there around devolved government and the differences between the other regions. And then finally, Ben Newby, who is COO of TEG Europe. And Ben is here in the corner for Wales. So we're going to start just by asking each of the panellists to give an overview of the challenges in their particular region and also what they'd like to see from the March budget. Now, obviously, Sunil, that doesn't necessarily apply to you guys, but what I'd like to kind of posit to you is a challenge around if you had some influence on local and central government and how they use their budgets, what would be on your wish list? So, Boyd, if I could start with you, please.
Hi everybody, my name is Boyd Slater. As we've been told, I represent Free the Night in Northern Ireland. There are many challenges in Northern Ireland, and for ourselves, really the way we've set ourselves up as a charity, we're really looking at the sort of cultural aspect, the community aspect of nighttime culture in Northern Ireland. The challenges we really have are very different to the rest of the UK. We live in a very divided society, and the spaces that we find in our city centres really are places of community. They're very inclusive places, they're very safe spaces, they're spaces for women and the LGBT community, and they're free from the sectarian violence that goes on throughout the rest of Northern Ireland, really, and they're a place where people come together, as I say, to sort of find friendship, fellowship, community. And so we focus on those areas specifically. And when it comes to thinking about how that moves forward, we really think about it in terms of cultural rights. You know, you have a right to express yourself, you have a right to a cultural life. And in Northern Ireland currently, we have 2 a.m. closing, or 2 a.m. Alcohol drinking up time, and 3 a.m. closing for licensing, for entertainment. And around about 2 years ago, there was a review in Northern Ireland to look at licensing laws, and what happened was they were going to reduce the opening times of venues to 2 a.m. And there was nobody advocating to change it. So that's why we set up. We set up to say there are key challenges here that need to be addressed. And on top of that, we have huge challenges in that our licensing still uses a surrender principle, which comes from the temperance movement. So 2 licenses get handed back, 1 gets handed back again. And no harm, it's a racket. The entire industry's a racket when it comes to licensing in Northern Ireland. Solicitors firms buy up the licenses and then advocate for those businesses through the courts. So there's no real advocacy there for young people who want to get themselves onto the licenses and have venues. The spaces are incredibly expensive to develop. And for instance, Belfast City Council had a project called Vacant to Vibrant. So it's looking at our city, the high street, and how we rejuvenate it. And the thing was that nobody put in for a creative space. And the reason being that you could get the money to do up the space, but you couldn't afford the license. And then even trying to get the license is nearly impossible because you have other monopolies within the city who will basically push you out of having that venue. So there are huge challenges. That's only a very, very small part of it. Other things are like public transport. We don't have a public transport system that operates after 11:30. But we're now engaging with all those people. We're engaging with government. We're engaging with the transport department. We've managed to get a cross-departmental group set up to deal with the nighttime economy, because when we met with the Department of Economy, they just said, oh, nighttime economy, nothing to do with us. So we've had to set these things up and advocate well for them to exist. But yes, we have lots of recommendations in our report that you can look at on our website, and I'm happy to talk to you about those as well.
Thank you, Boyd. Sunil, slightly different governments that you deal with, but I'm assuming there's a lot of the same challenges.
Yeah, similar. I mean, I guess the culture of restriction is definitely something that's still rife in Ireland. It's something that we're trying to obviously change. We have a group, an advocacy group called Give Us the Night. We're a community organisation. We originally formed back in 2004. At that time, it was an emergency response to measures that were being announced around the earlier curtailment of clubs. So we've got similar closing times up north to what Boyd's talking about. It's different in certain regions. You know, in rural areas, it's even earlier than what it is in Dublin. But at the time, there was a newspaper, I would say it was a leak actually to media, about plans that were in the process to shut down nightclubs in the city an hour earlier than what they were currently shutting. At that time it was 2:30, so the proposal was to bring back to 1:30. We set up an online petition. I set up an online petition because at the time it was just a few of us just talking about it. Then it kind of snowballed. Then it started to actually have an impact on because it was one of those things I find where kind of activism or campaigning and actually getting the public involved in things, they only tend to really get involved when something's been taken away from them. And in that case, it was like something was being taken away from them. So that was just we got a lot of momentum with that. And after seeing what we could achieve in, a few days, because essentially the Gardaí, our local police force, they kind of backed down on what they were attempting to do. Now, looking back on it, we can maybe see why they were in that situation. They were very under-resourced, and news stories or media links don't always tell the whole story. But anyway, fast forwards, we're still in the same position of trying to change some of the things that we tried to back then. There's been two lives to Give Us the Night. One was between 2004 and about 2011. We never actually stopped as a campaign, but I felt that at some time I needed to prioritise myself. I think anyone here who is involved in campaigning or activism or whatever you want to call it, if you want to do it and be effective with it, you have to put it first. But quite often you can be putting it first when there's no political or industry will. And that was what I kind of was sensing. And this was at the same time that my own DJ career was kind of taking off. So I had to make a choice. But about 5 years ago, relaunched a campaign. There's some new blood involved in the campaign now. And I would say that we've been quite successful. We've got cross-party support. One of our main asks is to reform the licensing laws. But there's a lot of other things on top of that. I mean, I can talk individually to anybody about our campaign if anyone's interested in it afterwards. In terms of where we're at right now, we're in a transition of trying to change our licensing laws, and we hope that will happen by the summer, hopefully early summer. But in the short term, insurance is a big issue. I mean, some people's insurance premiums have quadrupled from pre-pandemic to where it is now. accessing energy grants is very, very difficult for, I think we spoke about this just beforehand, but like even just, you know, some of the obstacles that are being put in front of venues includes that they, you know, the government won't accept it unless they have a meter reading. They won't take the bill. And funny enough, some operators can't access their meter. I know it sounds really foolish or silly, but it's that's the situation that some venue owners are in at the moment, and in some cases they're too late to give the meter reading on time in order to be able to get it backdated. So there's some of the issues at the moment. I would say insurance is the top one. That's not going away, and our government recently, they have brought in measures to reduce personal injury claims, because definitely there is as much as the insurance issue is a big issue in Ireland, we do have a culture, a claim culture, you know, and in ways, anyway, pretty much everyone has exited the market, so it's very hard to insure a nightclub. Finally, I suppose just very quickly, the problems now I find with operators and nightclub operators, they're kind of in two camps, because on one hand you have those who are running daytime businesses, food businesses, or maybe pubs, but it's the standalone operators who I'm really worried about now, because they're the ones that are really hemorrhaging money, and I guess we can talk more about it as the conversation develops. So.
Thank you, Sonil. Micah, I'm going to come to you in a moment, because you're going to be the kind of the link for this session between hopefully the economy and governmental departments. So, Michael, if I could just jump to you and ask you again, what are the main issues in Scotland, facing Scotland at the moment, and where does the economy sit in terms of communication with the government, influencing policy, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think in terms of some of the main issues, you know, energy policy and so on, the UK as a whole, broadly speaking, has the same issues, and everybody's feeling, well, not feeling the heat, feeling the cold draft from that. The energy prices, you know, I think I'm right in saying it's the same right across the UK, and what's coming in at the end of March is an 85% cut in the amount of subsidy that's currently available, and that's going to affect people right across the board. So, you know, there's no real devolved difference there. Where it becomes different for us in Scotland is really the big one at the moment is that the rates relief which is available to hospitality businesses in the rest of the UK, I'm not certain about Northern Ireland, but I think it is, but it's not available at all in Scotland. And you know, when challenged on it, the Scottish Government have a stock answer to it. The UK Government have told us, when I say us, I mean the NTIA, they've told us that using the Barnett formula, which is how money is distributed to the devolved administrations, that the same amount of money that's made available for rates relief in England has been, you know, passed to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government are at liberty to choose how they spend that money, and in the Scottish Government's own budget announcement just before Christmas, they declined to pass on any of that relief to Scottish businesses, and cited a survey apparently that nobody knows anything about, but they said that businesses were surveyed and told them that their top ask was for the poundage to be reduced, not for relief on the actual rates bills, and there's nothing to substantiate that claim from Scottish Government, but they completely stonewall the argument basically, and I think, you know, that this is something that is peculiar to Scotland. I mean, the devolved government in Scotland has significant, you know, powers and significant ability to choose how to use the budgets that's available. And this is what they're choosing to do, and no amount of protestations from our industry seems to be making any difference. So that's the biggest issue, I think, in terms of costs that's facing us as unique from the rest of the UK, you know. There's one or two other things upcoming in Scotland that are causing some consternation. A deposit return scheme that's coming into Scotland, and they're driving this through to come into force from August this year, and nobody knows much about it within the trade in Scotland, and nobody's ready for it. But essentially what the deposit return scheme is doing is forcing businesses to pay 20 pence for every individual bottle, can, plastic container at point of purchase, and then you get that 20 pence back when that item is returned, which all sounds great in theory. And of course, the government cites that, oh, this works successfully all over Europe, which is a very questionable claim in itself. But you know, the reality of that operationally is, you know, it's literally taxing. In my own premises, almost all our products, we have in Glasgow, there's a ban on selling glass across the bar after midnight. So all our products in the sub club are sold in cans. So all our beers that we sell are in cans. So to get that 20 pence per unit back, we have to collect all the cans, bag them up in special bags, which are then have some special tags on them that the DRS operator gives you. And then those are taken away, they're counted, and once that's verified, you get your 20 pence per unit back. Now, that, I mean, even on the face of it, in that level, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, and the practicalities of trying to do it are even more ridiculous. But the real rub here is that these cans have to go back in perfect condition. So, I mean, it's completely impossible. So what we're getting basically is a 20 pence per unit tax, which we've no way of recovering. And obviously, in a nightclub setting, when you only have a couple of hours really to do your trade at night, it's completely impossible to get people to bring back their drink, or to decant it for that matter, which I wouldn't want to do anyway. So, you know, we're arguing with them over it, and they've promised to have a look into that specific issue and see if there's, you know, something that they can do by way of exemptions for premises like my own that have to operate with those type of products. Be aware, this is coming to England soon, 2025, it's coming to England. And although the English model of it, apparently glass isn't included. In Scotland, this is coming in, you have to break, all the glass has to be broken up, crushed into 10 centimetre pieces, believe it or not, and they then weigh the bags of broken glass to establish a correlation between the products you've sold and what you have on your purchase invoices. So, I mean, it's ludicrous stuff, but they're forcing it through. And just to finish on that, and I'll let Rob have a say on other stuff, but the reason that this has happened and being forced through in Scotland, it's really a political thing, because the Scottish government, the SNP, were only able to form a government by bringing the Scottish Greens on board with them. So, and the Scottish Green Party subsequently have split away to a certain extent from the UK Green Party over policy differences, particularly actually over the much publicised transgender reforms. So the Greens, who have 3 MSPs, are really driving the whole agenda for Scotland on this, and it's hugely onerous on our businesses. Anyway, I think I've probably said enough.
Thank you, Michael, and we'll pick up on a couple of those points shortly. Ben, you're representing the Welsh interests here. Just tell us a little bit about the key issues in your region.
Yeah, it's. I think. I mean, there are some positives. You know, I spoke to a few of our Welsh colleagues, and you know, there are wins. You know, there are good things happening. It's important to obviously see the difference between the capital Cardiff and then the surrounding areas. You know, Swansea. You know, then further off through like Ponty and areas like that. So. One thing the Welsh Government did that was very strong during the pandemic was engagement. You know, there was regular fortnightly, monthly meetings addressing the stakeholders. Obviously, they made some massive clangers, you know, closing us on New Year. I mean, so everyone understands Wales, the first time Wales was out of a lockdown for a whole year was Jan 26 this year. So they've had a lot of closures that weren't experienced elsewhere. I mean, like I said, there's positives, but then some of those positives are causing issues. So what's happened in Cardiff last year was obviously there's been a big push to get those big acts into the Millennium Stadium, Principality Stadium, sorry. And unfortunately, Cardiff doesn't really have that infrastructure to handle like 30,000 people. So what we were seeing is, yes, great for Welsh economy, great for Cardiff, but then we saw, nightmares in car parks, nightmares in rows, the Cardiff kind of small venues were then experiencing drop-offs when those gigs were happening. So I think something the MVT's suggested is, those big gigs should quid of every ticket goes to the independents. And those sort of things I think are quite intelligent. Because obviously it's good for, Cardiff to get Beyonce, Ed Sheeran and whatnot, but it does then impact those other businesses. So that was quite a challenge last year. I think one of the concerns, is electronic music. There are some big events that do well, but the kind of underground 500,000 cap kind of events are struggling. That's talking to other people then on a sort of, in regards to our business, we've got 20 late licenses to trade till 3 a.m. and pre-pandemic, we would run out of them in March and just have the whole year scheduled, job done. Now it's like, we only used 18 last year because we had 2 cancellations. A Darren Starr's event that did 850 in 2021, cancelled due to ticket sales. And, obviously we're not going to penalise the promoters because they're already challenged, you know what I'm saying? So I think the electronic music report, which everyone should read if you haven't read it yet, that came out yesterday, that's going to be a big, help. And I think when you've got a country like Wales, obviously, we've got the Eisteddfod, a celebration of dance, culture, poetry, etc. I think there needs to be more work done on that music because, they were great with CRF, supported us in arts and culture, recognise the importance of what we do. But at the same time, if I see another gig go into Bristol as if it's meant to be for Cardiff, like, oh my God, there's a whole bridge to get over, So it's on our end, we're really trying to kind of push more live into that area, but we are seeing a slight decline. On the flip side of it, Club in Cardiff doing great work. We work quite closely with them. We're getting in those kind of good acts, so that's positive. But I think generally the feedback I've had is that Cardiff High Street doing well. The concern there is are we going to whitewash the city with big chains, lose that independent spirit and, the great work that people do. Swansea reported like a 30% decrease in sales over the last few months, which obviously is really concerning. Big part of that is the student market. So we've seen I've seen this in England as well, to be fair, but, it's that, we're still experiencing that 3 years of, freshers almost that didn't get to enjoy that culture of, moving out for the first time. Yeah, they go to the high street during freshers, then all of a sudden the mate goes, oh, check out this weird drum and bass club down here, do you know what I mean? So I think that's impacting everybody in that way. Then, of course, and not a bad thing. Well, if you sell booze, it's a bad thing, but obviously people want to be healthier, they don't want to drink as much, so I think the expansion of your non-alcoholic portfolio is going to be key over the next couple of years. On what we're doing, NTIA, the focus I think for this year is, like I said, the government did really good work during the pandemic, but that's now reduced to once a quarter. And at the moment, there's what's called a visitor levy that's coming in. Doesn't really impact venues and that side of thing, much more of a problem for guest houses and those kind of secondary incomes, but that's taking a lot of the narrative. So it's an hour every 3 months. That is not enough time to talk about all the other hospitality businesses. And for the nighttime economy, you've got, obviously it's great, but we are still the sort of baby in those organisations. You've got like UKH representing, restaurants, etc. And of course they represent everybody in that way, but it's that nighttime economy, that electronic music economy, which could pump so much into the economy that I just feel that it needs a much more dedicated approach. And I certainly think that part of that is going to be pushing for a nighttime champion, advisor, that sort of thing. And I think for Wales, it needs to be somebody that isn't Cardiff-centric, because there's other places in Wales, shockingly, do you know what I mean? And they've got their own challenges, and I think it's important that, that outreach is done looking at that economy. And I think Welsh government, and like I said, Vaughan Gethin, the economy, he's engaged, and he does genuinely care. He goes to venues, do you know what I mean? He goes out and listens to music, and he's always very supportive in that end. But I just think there needs to be a bit more of a dynamic approach now in Wales with the nighttime industry. Because I was chatting to Gary from Sim City in Swansea, and basically Gary's like the creative driving force of culture and art within the city, and he's worrying about his fucking worrying about his electricity bill. Yeah, all right. Worried about, and it's like, what needs to happen is we need to give our creatives and our promoters and, those people the space to do what they do mentally, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's that recognition. I think we've had the recognition from government that we're important, but I also think it's almost a bit of a self-recognition as well. Like, what we do is justified. I saw some experiences where, venues that were doing great work, as in bringing DJs to cities and all of that stuff, because they didn't quite understand that actually that's what you can get the support for. They're putting applications that were more like, oh, we do free DJ lessons for the community. And it's like, and they didn't get the money. So that's what we did great as the NTIA, was we were able to then sit with them, go over their CRF2 applications, and then really kind of bolster them and say, look, all this great stuff you do with music, that's the meat. That's what will get you the support and the money. And, we were able to activate, a good few $100,000 for venues across Wales that wouldn't necessarily have it. So I think that engagement with government, I do think there's obviously, the continuing of the business rates relief. It'd be great to get VAT on discount on alcohol, not just food and things like that. Obviously, that's always a touchy subject, but it's obviously how a lot of people make their money. You know what I'm saying? And of course, the final thing is what we saw, especially in December. So December was looking real nice. Week 1 good, week 2 better. Expecting that heavy hitter week 3, but we, and from Gary, a lot of people I've spoken to, experienced a real drop-off on that 3rd week, based on actual ticket sales, and it was related to the train strikes. Because when we ran a questionnaire, we got about 350 responses. 49% of our customers use the train to get to venues in Wales, and that was the exact drop-off that we saw versus actual ticket sales. So, obviously solidarity with people that strike, like, fuck, paying more money. Do you know what I mean? There's plenty out there. They do a lot harder work than a lot of people that get paid a ton. So, do you know what I mean? Like, I understand why it's happening, but then there are these knock-on effects where, and again, I think similar to what you were saying about public transport, the last train out of Cardiff is like 11 o'clock. Yeah. You're not even seeing the end of the gig. And that sort of thing. So, like I said, so positives, but definitely challenges, and then all the usual ones, utilities are killer, costs have gone up. One good positive, because it's up there, staffing has settled down. We experienced a real blip in Wales with like real staffing challenges.
There was a moment for the whole industry where that was a real, a real shock.
And we've been lucky. I mean, we implemented a successioning program that's been going on for about 4 years now, really. So at the moment in Tramshed, all our management team used to be bartenders, which I know I'm a CIO, so I have to care about like EBITDA. That's the best thing we did last year. I love it. Do you know what I mean? And then so we're investing in the economy and things like that. And I suppose the final thing is just, if you want to grow the economy, give businesses a space to make money. And with what we do, we make money when we trade. So give us more trading hours and not giving so much resistance. So councillors, licensing, work together, not enforce, not restrict, help us grow. We'll communicate with residents. We'll be good citizens, but we've got to make money.
I think it's, just trying to pull all the threads together from everything that you've said, just before I bring you in, Micah. Certainly the themes that came out of yesterday, there is a reason that that you guys have had to set up campaigns, that you've had to collectivise, that you've had to lobby and try and influence policy. There is so much work that needs to be done. We talk about licensing, we talk about the staffing costs, energy, cost of living, etc. It's a dire situation that we find ourselves in, and of course, we wouldn't need bodies like the NTIA if it wasn't such a stark situation. So what I'm hearing from the regions is that there's some dialogue with government at different levels in different regions and countries. Micah, you've got now some experience behind you in working with the for the City of Amsterdam as a policy advisor. I see you as the kind of link, the bridge between the nighttime economy and all its shapes and sizes, the primary, secondary, tertiary along the supply chain, but also, you have to translate what their needs are for policymakers, administrators. How does it work for you? What lessons can we learn from your work?
Well, thank you. As said, I'm a policy advisor for arts and culture, so I approach it from the cultural perspective. And we're very lucky that we have a deputy mayor for arts and culture that feels really strongly about putting night culture and club culture on the map and really be part of cultural policy. So I think that was the first step, that there was released a night vision that really stated the value, the economical value, but also the social value and the artistic value of night culture. So I think that's something that we're still advocating every day, also within our administration, because to be honest, it's really a new approach. Before, this night vision was presented, it was still really being regarded as the troublemaking sector. So that's step one, to acknowledge that it has a really great value for the city. But now we're in the phase of really trying to set tools and really invest in the sector. But yeah, as you all mentioned, I mean, the circumstances are so much bigger than the cultural approach. I mean, it's about licensing. In Amsterdam, we have really scarcity of space. So I work for the City of Amsterdam now 1.5 years, and one of the first things I did working also for night culture was to start these walk-ins, like consultant hours for the sector to really know what's going on. And I can guess about 80% of the questions and the trouble is coming from, I have a really great idea, but I don't have any room. Or there are so many people we would like to involve, but they cannot afford to live in Amsterdam anymore. So the creative space and literally, that's a big problem. So we need to do something about that. You cannot just stick to your old principles of subsidizing as you do a theater, because you can give money for programming to the clubs, but if they cannot pay the energy bills or the housing, or if there's not even room because all the new buildings are being built for housing, it's just disappearing from the city. So we have some themes. First, to realize temporary and long-term room space for night culture. Also subsidy, but maybe more for isolation or for other, not just programming. And really build a good structure in Amsterdam for advocacy and communication that gathers the clubs, so it's not fragmented. So those are a few steps we're taking now, but we're still pioneering and finding out what the best way is to support the sector. So I'm really open for suggestions as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Micah. I mean, it's frustrating that we just reference in the report that was launched yesterday, the value of electronic music, which demonstrated 2.6 billion figure. You have the figures that UK music releases every year, that the music industry is worth around the 4.5 billion mark. We demonstrate constantly, again and again, the financial value, the economic value. We've demonstrated the cultural and societal value. I think the frustration now lies in that it's that last barrier now. We talk the language that policymakers, politicians, and those with a vested interest in government like to use themselves. for me, it's where the next step is into transforming or translating that into action. It sounds like, you know, some of the work that you're doing is reversing long-held principles, long-held policies. If I can throw this over to you, Sunil, you talked about at the start when you began campaigning in 2004 that you learned that there may be a kind of curtailing or restrictions of licensing laws, and now you're hoping that there's some legislation that will go through later this year. You know, those breakthrough moments are really important. Are you seeing the same kind of change in thinking that Mike is talking about in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that gave us hope, and I think a lot of the time you have to kind of rely on timing, you know, and you have to know when it is your time, because like I was saying earlier, you can't put all of yourself into a campaign like this when it isn't actually going to go anywhere. So for me, I knew the time was right, and that was because there were local elections coming up, which meant that we were going to be able to target the political parties, and obviously knowing that there's a general election looming not far after that as well. So we have a different structure. We don't have anything like a directly elected mayor in Dublin. We have a city manager who's essentially like an extension of the government. It's essentially like a government official that's there. That's kind of like the city accountant, city manager. But you know, you can't. Unlike the structure in Amsterdam, we can't just go to the city manager. I mean, the very prospect of that would just sound ridiculous. For me to be able to get onto the phone to Owen Keegan, our city manager, people would laugh at that idea, you know. Also, I think we do have champions for culture and the arts within the city council, but their hands are very much tied. And we were told by the city council, as were councillors a couple of years ago, as we kind of got deeper into COVID, that, you know, the first cuts were going to be with culture, you know. But I think there is a mindset, and what we're starting to see now, I said it before, I mean, I'm on record saying it quite a few times actually in the past, is we needed to wait for a certain generation of politicians to die off, you know, figuratively speaking, you know, not necessarily
it's a stark truth, yeah.
And that has slowly been happening, you know. Even in our previous Justice Minister, our outgoing Justice Minister, was twice the age of our incoming Justice Minister, and that made such a big difference, you know. So Helen McEntee, she's on maternity leave now, but she was a champion of our campaign and our cause, you know. So when she was appointed Justice Minister, I was hoarse. It was like winning the World Cup. I was ringing everyone. I was like, you wouldn't believe who's going to be Justice Minister. Now, it's not that everyone it would be a huge fan of the party that she's in currently, but it has to be said, Leo Varadkar and Helen McEntee drove that to where it was initially. They're the ones that got that conversation going. Of course, anyway, I won't get too deep into that, but definitely a changing of the guard from an age perspective. And also, I would say that a lot of the people that have gone in and kind of rolled up their sleeves have been strong women politicians, you know, at a local level and also at a national level, you know. Claire Byrne as well, a local Green councillor, was somebody that really got things moving for us at a local level. Herself, Hazel Chu as well, got me appointed onto the City Arts Committee. So we've had a little bit more of a voice, and we've also developed a really good relationship with the Culture Department. They're overseeing nighttime economy. What I'm sort of feeling now, though, is that the government are throwing a little bit of money at the Culture Department. The Department of Arts and Culture and Tourism and Media, I mean, it's a big portfolio that the minister has. I mean, they're there to do culture. They're not necessarily there to do economy. And the further we move into this, you know, and they're doing amazing work. I mean, Deirdre and Deborah, actually two officials, travelled over to this and are here today actually as well. So they're really invested in this, you know, they're really interested in it, and it's really been great to work with them. But I can't say the same about some other government departments. Not that we're not working really closely with them, but we do liaise with other government departments, and sometimes trying to deal with the city council is really, really difficult as well. But as we're kind of facing some of the financial issues that we're in now, and actually I didn't mention earlier licensing costs, that's something that we're working on now. You wouldn't believe how much we have to pay to open. You have to pay €410 plus legal fees per night to open. So if you wanted to open 364 days a year, now, there's not many places that would, but if you did, it would cost you 150,000 a year. That's how much it would cost. So it stands to reason that it's within that kind of difficult financial environment and trying to, they doubled the licensing costs, and we haven't really had a fit-for-purpose license, and this was back in 2008. What we're very good at in Ireland is tinkering with licensing laws. We haven't overhauled them, but I think we were quite relentless, you know, in terms of sending submissions and actually providing the government with the policy that we want to see. And I have to say, although it's been a slow process, you have to have a lot of patience with this stuff. You really do.
It's the
you
slow
can be
burn.
banging your head off a brick wall. And certainly what I was saying...
Playing the long game.
Yeah, but certainly and just to finish on that, I suppose, who probably frustrates me the most are probably the city council, but that's because of the structure that's in place there. We've made a lot more headway with the government, but finally, I think now in terms of economy, I think we have a really good case now to go to the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment and tell them to get a little bit more hands-on with the nighttime economy. Let the Culture Department look after nighttime culture, and let the appropriate department look after the finances a little bit, and obviously Finance Department and public expenditure as well. But Enterprise, Trade and Employment in terms of incentivising new investment into the industry and helping to protect existing operators, I think that's the route we need to go a little bit more now. So
thank you. We've got around 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to throw a couple of questions back. Something that Ariel, the New York nighttime mayor, said yesterday was around mediation. That was in relation to disputes between venues and local residents. And I think taking that idea of mediation in this situation where if there isn't a constructive, sensible dialogue between the economy and policymakers, between civil servants, between those people who can help to change legislation, then there needs to be some sort of middle ground. And I know the NTIA have done lots of great work, but they just don't have the resource, like any industry body, to be everywhere at once. So there needs to be, I feel, a look at that. But Sunil, your point about generations, and a move to a completely different mindset and culture and way of thinking is key, I think, in all of the regions and in the countries that we're talking about here. I'm gonna do a quick fire question now for each of you. So we've got the March budget coming up. Obviously, details of that are still yet to be released. I'm going to ask you to just give me a quick couple of points as to what would be on your wish list if you could influence financial policies that affect the nighttime economy. Boyd, can I start with you?
Yeah, well, what we would like to see is obviously some saving for those businesses that are providing culture to the community in Northern Ireland. And there should be some sort of discount in the taxes that they pay for that. But what has to happen is that has to be reflected back into the business, back into the scene, and back into workers. Workers are the most underpaid within the hospitality industry. 40% of them are living below the poverty line. And when I've went out and spoke to some businesses and spoke to some of these people who are saying that they want to see these tax savings and whatever else, afterwards they walk out and get into their Bentleys and BMWs and drive away. So what I want to see is making sure that it goes back into the community. Whatever those savings are, it has to go back in, because Northern Ireland doesn't have inward investment. We lose a third of our graduates because there's a lack of opportunities. And through our own little bit of research, we found that we're probably losing up to 50% of what we would consider our creative professionals. You have Northern Ireland artists selling out your venues week in, week out here. You have Bicep playing here in a few weeks. They sell out every place. They're from Northern Ireland. Max Cooper sold out the Printworks next week from Northern Ireland. David Holmes from Northern Ireland. Space Dimension Controller from Northern Ireland. All of these people are selling out your venues over and above throughout Europe.
You need to have a slice of that.
And yet, none of that money comes back into Northern Ireland. So we want to see inward investment, and we also need to see the British government actually thinking about Northern Ireland as a place, not as a side thought.
Yeah.
Every time you have thought of us as a side thought, things have no harm fucked up. And that's true. We're sitting in Northern Ireland right now without a government. And that's all down to how the British government have dealt with Brexit. And, you know,
That's
it's
another panel
totally
discussion in itself.
another discussion, but
Well, it was.
totally dysfunctional at the minute.
Yeah.
And we're having those challenges just trying to get people to agree with each other on simple points, never mind the sort of issues that we're dealing with here.
Michael, if I can throw it out to you, if you can keep it short. A couple of things on your budget wish list.
Yeah, keep it very short. Some help with rates relief would be very important for Scotland, and I know that that's not a UK budget thing, as I already went into. Big ask, I think, for everybody in all the hospitality trade bodies is to reduce VAT. And Ben touched on it earlier. I think that's a really significant thing, and it's a way of putting money straight back into the nighttime economy that doesn't, you know, it's not convoluted. It just, it can be done very simply, and I think it would have a really widespread benefit.
Thank you, Michael. Ben, couple of quick points.
Yeah, I mean, same with Mike, really. You know, it's those easy wins where we can get the support without it being a handout. You know, continued rate relief, the VAT on booze. You know, all the duty that's paid, reduction there. You know, I suppose, you know, we're such a regulated industry. It'd be nice to see maybe a bit more regulation in other industries that are current. You know, because hopefully this situation isn't going to last forever. You know, but we want to make sure that when the suppliers see those decreases are then passed on to us as the businesses and the customers. And I think a big concern at the moment is, you know, and I suppose on an individual level, we see it with, you know, fuel prices. Those things have come down, but now it's like, well, is £1.47 the new, you know, is that the new baseline? And then we're stuck with it. So, yeah, so hopefully just some sensible movements and sensible support. But we shall see.
Thank you, Ben. Micah, if I could just ask you for one thing that we should all be doing in order to engage effectively with those who legislate for us.
I think it would be great if there would just be an investment in night culture areas. So to focus on areas where there's lower rent, better transportation, and really dare to invest as a city in certain nightlife hubs. But we're not there yet.
I'd like to thank the panel, and hopefully all of you guys are sticking around today. So obviously it's an opportunity to speak to each. Boyd Slater, Sunil Sharp, Michael LaCoultre, Michael Grieve and Ben Newby, thank you very much. Round of applause, please. Thank you, folks.